what I've noticed that, working with students as well at NUST, is that some of the behaviors, we don't recognize them as being abused. We just take it for granted, because society has accepted these things, so it's normal. And it's okay for men to do what they want. Okay, for example, just whistling and calling you names. How many of you have been, passing through a construction where people are whistling, they are calling you names and stuff like that? That is harassment. Because, but when you walk through there, they don't expect you to go and report to the police. They say, no, it's just one of those things, So harassment really is any unsolicited action that you don't want. Unsolicited meaning you don't want it. Okay, whether it's something that someone sends you on social media, you don't want it. You didn't ask for it. Okay, whether it's touching you, whether it's saying, spreading rumors or scandalizing your name, all those things are also part of sexual harassment. Okay, and then the common one that is in colleges, when lecturers take advantage of students. This happens, and then people don't report. They say they'll report when they've graduated. By the time they graduate, it's too late. Okay, you can't do anything about it. So there is something that is called time. If a certain time lapses and you haven't reported, then your case may be dismissed. I had a typical case of a student. A lecturer had sent a selfie with his item there and his face, saying, "See what you're missing." So, because she kept it for 3 years, right? And she was ready to graduate. The face was there, the little item was there. Because real men don't do that. So, when we engaged our lawyer, we were told that, because she's also erased the chart. You know how you have your chart? So they wanted that chart that would lead to that picture. So we couldn't do anything because one time it elapsed, and also she was a married woman, the husband knew, the husband didn't do anything, and say, there's so many cases that have happened, they won't listen to you, which is not true, okay? So by the time she came, honestly, I was so disappointed. We really thought we'd got this guy because he's notorious for that. But at that time, she was one woman who stepped up and said, this man has done this and he is evidence. But the time affected that whole thing. Okay. So it comes in many forms, sometimes just gestures, just comments, that people bring to you. And also sometimes, you are in a place, that eyeing, they're checking you out. When they check you out, this is really harassing you in a way. Because, they might think, you're good looking and all that. Checking you out is not good. Because you don't want that. And after that, when people do that to you, you end up, being afraid to walk alone, or cut through a crowd. Sometimes, I'm sure some of you have done that. Whether you're on a bus, or whether you're in a class, guys will block your way. Okay, and they'll be playing with you. They think it's playing. It's not playing. It's really, it affects a lot of people. And then, as a matter of fact, they end up being very, very reserved and lonely, and then they end up depressed. Because if you don't have that kind of support, then you have a problem. But where I'm really concerned is when students don't talk to the reporting structures in the institution. There is a policy. Okay, at my institution, it's just a harassment policy. It's not a sexual harassment policy, because a lot of people are saying they have sexual harassment policies, and it's a policy that is tied in with staff. I want a sexual harassment policy that deals with student issues, because then we can deal with student issues, and we know where you can go and report when there's a problem. But if it's just general, your department chair is harassing you, right? How do you take the measure there? Because they say follow protocol. If he's the one, or the dean is doing that to you, how do you go through those channels? And most of these guys are guys as well, okay? Yeah, we have females here and there. So the whole structure, and I'm sorry, men team up together, and it's just like doctors. Try to report a doctor for something that they've done wrong. You never find one that will agree and say, yes, this doctor did not do the right thing. So people team up together, they protect their careers as well. So it will be very, very difficult for you to prove that. But if we have females within the reporting structures, it becomes better. But what I want to urge to you is that report immediately. It doesn't matter whether they've raped you, whether they've just touched you. If it's inappropriate, it's inappropriate. But also be sure, because you don't want to insinuate something that is not there. Okay. Very often when ladies, don't make it is when you don't have the full facts. If you entertain and tolerate and laugh sometimes, the guy thinks, oh, she's interested. Okay. But if it's no from the very get-go, no, I don't like that. Okay. And what you tell them, that's that. Okay. So it is better that you really come out in the open and tell them that that kind of behavior you don't need, because you have probably your own life as well. So I found that many students get depressed, some drop out of school. Because, if the lecturer is still in the department, what are you going to do? You're not going to throw them out. Or you change a university because of somebody. Okay? And once you report, you're protected. Okay? Because we know. And if anything happens, we know that it's because of this. Even if they give you a different grade, maybe you're supposed to get an A, you get a D. Because you've reported, we trace it and we know that is because you're being victimized. But if you don't say anything, you continue to be victimized.
Memory, can you share with us your experience having to deal and help sexual harassment victims?
We know, as the doc says, it's beyond that, and it's such a traumatic experience, physical as well as psychological. So that's we always emphasize that please come through for psychosocial support, for counseling, as well as the family members or the guardians can actually go through the counseling to understand what is happening, because it's a traumatic experience, to understand what is happening to the survivor. And there's this misconception that you can just go through sexual harassment, whether it's rape or violence, and switch out of. How many times survivors share that they have been told to snap out of it. Life is hard. Just move on. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way. Whether it happens 20 years ago or yesterday or after an hour or a minute, we always encourage that please come through to receive the psychosocial support. Then in terms of experience, how many of you have watched the BBC documentary on sex for grades inside Ghanaian and Nigerian top universities? How many of you have watched that? Well, I see a few, just one hand, okay, thank you. 2 hands. And from the 2 hands, how many have really related to, well, this happens in my institution, because all of you are students here, yeah. And just like, yeah, it's happening in Ghana or Nigeria, but I can actually relate that this is happening in our spaces at tertiary institutions, at universities, and I could relate. I did my undergrad in maybe 2008, but I could still relate. And I'm an alumni of National University of Science and Technology. And I'm proud that those are some of the measures that you've put in place to address issues of sexual harassment. So in our experience, survivors do come in. And when they are coming in, the worst thing that they have gone through is self-blame. They have blamed themselves 1,000 times. That what did I do? Especially for the lecturer to do this, to send their picture. Did I seduce them? Did I lead them on? Is it happening to other students? As she said, the most saddest thing is it's never talked about. We know it happens. We've almost normalized it, that it's happening because of the power imbalances. What can you do? I need to pass. I need to survive 4 years. So how can I, because of the power dynamics, he is my lecturer, or she was my lecturer, she holds the key for me to graduate out of this institution, get a job. So that's most of the time the survivors take their time to come forward because they are blaming themselves. And for those that come forward, the experience is we focus much on the survivor or victim. What were you wearing? How many drinks did you have? Why did you go there by yourself? We knew when we were in college that you can't just, you will not go, especially if it's notorious, you have to go with support, right? They have to be close by. So it has been normalized in these institutions, and because of the power dynamics as well, it takes time for survivors to come forward. And when they come forward, it goes, some of the harassment goes further to actually rape. And we always emphasize, if it happens, it's a medical emergency. Please come through, go or visit any nearest health center, get medication, get treated for injuries, get medication to prevent STIs. Most importantly, within 72 hours, HIV prevention, where you can get your post-exposure prophylaxis. You talk to your psychologist or nurse counselors that understand what you're going through, the trauma that you've experienced. If you then want to come forward to the university authorities, to the police, you can then do that later, but at least you have accessed those medical services. So then when they come, as we said, it's the psychological trauma that they are going through is actually, it's there. Some, as she said, they'll end up dropping out of college. Some even after 20 years, they talk about it, that it's affecting their current relationships. It's affecting how they see men and trust men. So those are some of our experiences. I'll leave the room for us to then have a conversation. But just going through, because at 5 minutes, I see she's looking at me. They are just, I have written down, there are many predicators of sexual harassment in an institution, especially colleges. A culture that tolerates sexual harassment. Tolerance of bad behavior leads to bad behavior. Like we see whistling and we think it's minor, but we don't call it out. For anyone that then calls them out, they are maybe branded difficult or petty. They just whistled at you. Why are you're not making it, you're just blowing things out of proportion. But I feel violated because there are boundaries that we all have, and I didn't consent to this. The second thing is the power dynamics that I have already talked about. And sometimes most students in these colleges do not trust the mechanisms, right, put forward that they will respond to the issues. So the way mechanisms are weak, I'm sorry to say this stuff. They are really weak. And so sometimes, like, why should I go when my case is going to be dismissed, that I've deleted the chats, that I've, you know? So anyway, why should I go? Because the mechanisms are very weak. Then the recommendations to all of us, I'm happy that the policies are now there in some of the institutions. Let's escalate it at national level. But I just had a question about that lecture that you talked about, that isn't also an offense to just engage in a relationship with your students because of those power dynamics. Do they sign code of conduct that then stipulates that you know, it's a no-no for a lecturer to engage in a relationship with their students? Then the other thing is leadership, commitment to leadership. We, unfortunately, there are power imbalances. Most sectors are male-dominated. Not that I'm attacking men, but the victims or survivors mostly are female, and the perpetrators are male. And if you look at the leadership structure, the boys' club that you talked about, that if the chair of the department is also a perpetrator, who do you go to? So as a recommendation, I would then recommend that this establishment, at all institutions, we push for the establishment of independent complaints mechanisms, where at least the power imbalances, at least they are diluted as well. At least you have 4 or 5 people that are looking into your case. Extensive awareness, I think. Outside orientation week, we need to continuously talk about sexual harassment. Then to all of us, perpetrators rely on our silence. They thrive because they know we are going to keep quiet. If you see it happening to someone else, speak up. If it happens to you, there are always support structures that are there that you can go through. We talked about you can come to ARC, there are other organizations that you can actually go through and firstly get just counseling. How can I, this is happening to me, what can I do? But we always encourage, as you said, that it's always good to report when it happened at the moment, right there, then wait for 4 years, then you report the evidence. Whilst the evidence is still fresh, and a lot of actions could be done. Unfortunately, it's not only men that encourages this rape culture. When I talk about the rape culture, is the emphasis on the survivor and the questions that sort of blames the survivor. What were you wearing? How many drinks did you have? The responsibilities for all of us to start addressing and dismantling, because some of it we have normalized already. So unfortunately, you find out that sometimes it's the women that actually say, how many, we had 30 women here, why hair? Why only hair? All of us, 29, no one even ever approached that. So let's start changing our behaviors and things that we do every day. It's part of the rape culture and normalizing sexual harassment in our institutions.
What has already been said is very, very important. It's about unwanted attention. It's about power hierarchies. It's about both vertical, or if you like, superior power over inferior power. Looking at lecturers, senior members of administrative staff, senior members, and it doesn't even have to be senior members, it can just be members of various university departments. And in your case, the situation of students. So you have that vertical relationship where there is inequality of power between, usually, as has been said before, the female student and whom we might call the male perpetrator. Also, there is horizontal power relations between male and female students. There are the situations where kind of collectively males may take the view that female students are there for their delectation. Female students aren't at university for serious reasons. Female students are available. And that goes back pretty well historically into the attitudes about males and females and male and female relationships. But one of the problems with universities is if you look at the average age range of the student body, and I can still remember this, and it was a hell of a long time ago now, when I could remember being an undergraduate, that it's a kind of a mating ground. I don't mean it in a crude sense. I mean it simply in the sense that many of us met our life partners at university. We were in the same intellectual milieu. It kind of avoided having to go on dating sites, as you guys might do now on Facebook. It's a very, very difficult situation. How do you find the balance between that little exploratory investigation, the raised eyebrows, the little wave, or whatever it might be, which is a way of making contact, and what then becomes unacceptable. Because some of it will be acceptable to you. Some of it will be exactly what you would like. But some of it will be something you do not want. And it's making that decision and communicating that decision. Yes, universities do have policies. They're developing now. But for example, how many students are there here from UZ? Anyone from UZ? Have you ever tried to find the student handbook or the information on the sexual harassment provisions that the university claims it has in place? Try Googling it, you won't find it. They're hidden away. They're very difficult to find. There are supposed to be a series of mechanisms, just like NUST, that you can go through and affect that reporting process. So some of it, you will be only too happy. I am married, and when I look back now, I realize that I married somebody who technically was at a higher power level than me when he was a deputy warden in a hall of residence, and I was an undergraduate. But of course, you know, we made the sort of tentative moves. We're still married. It's my, believe it or not, 52nd wedding anniversary today. Oh. So you can't necessarily ban all contact, but there has to be a way of saying this is unacceptable. First attempt, that's fair enough. Second attempt, when you've made it very plain that no, this is not acceptable, you've then got to police it very carefully and not accept it on a permanent basis. And as I said earlier, it's very interesting. You are at a very different position to, I think, certainly you and I, when we were at university, in the fact that there's so much more awareness. The Me Too movement has totally changed the way in which women believe they have to accept unacceptable sexually based harassment, invitations, annoying behavior. You now have that collective power. There are more women in universities than there are men. So why are we all still cowering away and not realizing that this is a time to look at equality issues? The Constitution provides very clearly for equality. The Constitution provides for dignity. The Constitution looks at women's right to be educated. Look at Section 80. It treats women as the equal of men. So we've also got to have men involved in this discussion. We've also got to have young men and older men. There are men who probably have been doing this, and we've heard this, for a very long time, and they've got away with it. And therefore, it becomes a pattern and a habit. And they think they are invulnerable. There's another problem. When these offenses are reported, if they're investigated, and disciplinary proceedings take place, and staff members or even students are, in the case of staff members fired or students expelled, the university never tells you about it. It is hidden away. So the message of control is not put out there. There is not that level of fear. But there's another problem, and on this I'm going to stop. There are some men who are very concerned about this issue, and they are caring, but they do not understand that their position in the power hierarchy makes them almost unapproachable. There's a very, very sympathetic professor, male, that I know, it took me half a day to convince him that one of the reasons why female students would not come and tell him about the sexual harassment that was going on in his faculty was because he was the professor, he was the dean, and the female students were, in inverted commas, afraid of him and of his power. And he just kept saying, but they can come and talk to me. But they felt they couldn't. So what the universities have to do is to make sure that we have accessible mechanisms through which female students or male students, it's not just it's not just female-male, it can be female-female, male-male. That's what it used to be before women were en masse in universities. Male-male would have been a very serious problem. But now it can be much more broadly spread. But it's important that there are mechanisms that allow for reporting. The female students will say to you, we all know which optional courses you don't take. Why are they saying that? Because those are the courses they can avoid, where they know that there will be predatory male behavior going on. So that's the culture that we have to find a way of breaking.
So if you look at issues of sexual harassment, it's a violation of human rights. And what I'll highlight maybe would be our role as Zimbabwe Gender Commission when it comes to issues to do with sexual harassment. If you look at section 246 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, it highlights most of the functions, all the functions of the Zimbabwe Gender Commission. But with regards to sexual harassment, I'll focus on 3 of those. We receive and consider complaints from the public. We then carry out investigations as well as recommend prosecution. So for those that have issues, like earlier on, she highlighted on issue at an institution where there was no justice, where there was an issue of sexual harassment. You can even come to the Zimbabwe Gender Commission. I will share the contacts as soon as we finish. And now that you know what sexual harassment is, you know the forms of sexual harassment, you also need to know where the common places where sexual harassment takes place. It doesn't only take place at tertiary institutions. Even at workplaces, I know most of you would go on attachment. You might experience sexual harassment at the institution that you'll be attached to. You then need to raise the complaint or a report. And we also have the police where you can go and report. If you go to a police station, you ask for the victim-friendly unit. Most of those are, in fact, all were trained on how to deal with issues to do with domestic GBV as well and sexual harassment. Then when it comes to issues specifically on complaints on sexual harassment, we have a legal and investigations department. For those that have any complaints, that have faced any form of violence, please come through. We'll assist you because we've done some investigation, some of which you might have noted in my newspapers, but we cannot share the results because we have to treat these issues with confidentiality. So you are free to come to our offices. So as a country, we then also need a comprehensive policy that speaks to sexual harassment in particular.
For example, in the UZ Code of Conduct for staff members, there's just one line about sexual harassment. And it's not even really being treated as a particularly serious issue. Staff are not made aware of how damaging this can be for their career. Because technically, if you are offering a student marks for sexual favors, that ought to be, and is in fact, a ground for dismissal. But how do you establish it? How do you prove it? The question was asked though, what if you agree? What if you consent? Well, part of the problem is, and I think the answer was actually contained in the question, it's about power dynamics. I am not, as a female student, on an equal power level with my lecturer. I don't feel that I can challenge the lecturer. I feel that if I say no, I may be prejudiced. Even if I want to say no, I'm very uncomfortable about responding to that situation. What has to happen is, it's not going to be just one of you to whom this happens, I can assure you. There's probably going to be quite a number of you. So department by department or faculty by faculty, you can almost begin compiling that dossier. If you as female students look at this and realize how you are being sexually exploited, you are not a minority, you are a majority now. And in 20 or 30 years' time, this is going to have turned over completely. Because, for example, most universities are now somewhere around 60% female. Just think about what the higher echelons of government, what the higher echelons of universities are going to look like in 30 years' time. I won't see it, I'm too old. But I know it will be a very different, if you like, set of gender dynamics. And you're now sitting in a situation where you need to begin changing that internal culture.
The last session, you were challenged to challenge this systematic or structural practices or beliefs that perpetuate sexual harassment and some of the issues that we struggle with. I think it's the same that we need to continuously challenge that universities are safe spaces for us as women, and also a challenge as well. It's very good that we are here as women talking about this, but we also need to talk to men as well about certain behaviors that makes us feel uncomfortable or that we don't want. And the last thing is just, Professor Stewart talked about engaging boys and men. I'll also add engage girls and women. That a no has to be a no. A yes has to be a yes, not then, you know, the pleasure of being hunted. It just has to be a simple no. If you don't want, no. If you want, it has to be a yes. So just engaging girls and women on clearly communicating, I think, yeah.
I was just going to add also something that's very common. We, you know, you'll agree with me, date rape.
Yes.
Okay, even if you bought me that dinner and we've danced all night and we are going to whatever step, if you feel at that stage that you don't want to do this anymore, you can still say no. Because a lot of the times people think, after I've eaten, I can't say no. No, even when you're lying next to each other, you can still say, just get up and say, no, this is not working out. And also I wanted to mention that, you know, if a guy keeps haunting you, which is called stalking, You know, that's also a bad sign, because in the end, when he gets you where there's no one else, there's no telling as to what you do. So if someone say you say no and they keep coming and saying no, that's another form of harassment. You know, like he's saying no should be no. You know, there's no, that's conditional, it's a no.
Thank you very much. Now over to you guys. From different institutions, who would say they know what their university or institution says about sexual harassment? Do you know if there's any document or policy or any support structures from your universities? Just quickly. Anyone?
HIT. I'm not quite sure if the draft was finished, but we're drafting the separate a separate standalone sexual harassment policy, and it included that the case would not only be taken by the board of the school, but it would be a case taken to court for the perpetrator to be fully analyzed under a judge, and to, you know, the person would pay instead of being fined.
I just saw another hand there.
Yes, University of Technology. We actually have one sexual harassment policy, and it is inclusive of the fact that the perpetrator goes under investigations, then is supposed to be suspended before a hearing. Then when after the hearing is automatically expelled.
Okay, thank you. One last,
If he's guilty.
Yes, that's
one last
according to the policy, by the time he gets to the hearing, he's already guilty. Yes, they're like, it says that they don't get into hearing unless they are sure that he's guilty. Because if it turns out he's not guilty, the burden will be on the student now, that the student lied, and he or she would have to be accountable.
One last comment from the back.
Okay, so I'm coming from the University of Zimbabwe, and I really want to acknowledge what have been said about our student charter. So within the university students charter, that's when we have the section that talk about sexual harassment. However, in 2015, that is when they managed to edit and put some nitty-gritties to really make sense about the issue. For example, clearly defining what is sexual harassment and the reporting mechanism. But however, the loophole that we have been identifying in that section is that the reporting mechanism is from A, B, C. And in the event that B, because A is specified and is so specific to say we go to the guards around campus, but they never clearly say what that in the event that A or B is the one who victimized me, where do I go? Because we cannot skip or jump the hierarchy. So that is still the problem that we have. And also it is not detailed to say, you know, in terms of the students among themselves, it's not clear. So I think with the University of Zimbabwe, we really have a long way to make these things be so practical.
Okay, thank you.